Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of CS Cyber. I'm Chad.
I'm Sean.
And today we're going to be continuing our series on NIST 800-171, and we're going to be diving into control family number 1, which is it's access control.
Access control.
Access control. So let's just kind of jump in, right? So access control is the process of granting or denying access to the physical and digital resources of your organization. Really, who can get in your house and what can they get to once they're there?
Right. Absolutely.
So I think, just kind of a real world scenario of this, government contractors, networks breached. We've talked about this before on the show. People aren't really kicking down the front door anymore and, taking over your firewall. They're just logging in, right? So knowing what access people have in your organization is really critical to complying with this control.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just kind of why it matters. Effective access control limits exposure to sensitive information, sensitive systems, specifically CUI data. That's what NIST is there to protect.
Right.
And it minimizes the impact of malicious attacks and anything that may go awry within the organization. So this control family has 22 controls, I think. Let me just see. Yep, 22 sub-controls. And you'll see this a lot with the NIST controls, right? There's a control family, and then there's sub-controls underneath that. So just some practical examples of control mechanisms, right? This is where we like to talk about some real-world things that either we see in the field or things you can do to provide role-based or access control. And the first one is role-based access control.
Right.
So just setting that up, like what would that look like in an organization?
Well, I mean, role-based access is need to know, right? And unfortunately, a lot of organizations don't practice that. So this could be project-related. So it could be access-based, a role based on a specific project and what they need access to. It could be simpler, probably examples are things like HR, right? HR gets access to HR.
Right.
Engineering accesses engineering, those types of things. So, really being in touch with the employee and what their job role is, and then mapping them to the access.
Yeah, we're going to get into ways a little bit later on how you can do that and some of the challenges around that.
Yeah.
Multi-factor authentication, right? That's something that we preach a lot to organizations and even internally is just multi-factoring everything. That's an access control mechanism that is really, it's really low cost.
It is, yeah, and more of a move to like cat card type access. So YubiKeys and those types of things, like really pushing towards that versus
they sent me a text.
Yeah, like we want to get away from that.
Why don't you like the text?
Well, because China compromised 9 of our telco providers. So most of the cellular access would be considered compromised at this point. So if you're authenticating off the public cellular network, I think you're opening yourself up to areas you don't want to be open to.
That's good. I wanted you to talk about that a little bit. So that was kind of a setup, right?
No, it was good.
Because we're moving to SAML, we're moving to different authentication methods, and I think a lot of people think that I have this multi-factor set up. It sends me a text, but that's been compromised too.
Yeah, correct.
All right. Access monitoring tools. So implement solutions that track access attempts across the organization. That could be to your VPN. That could be to your file share. That could be to a couple of different things. Automatic session locking. I see this a lot in the field. The people that just don't have that set up, and it'll just persist forever until there's a network blip, right?
Correct.
And it kills the connection. But if you can, configure systems to lock out after a certain period of time, it's just an extra access mechanism. Nobody's going to walk up behind you and start typing away or come across an unlocked. How many times have you logged in or attempted to log into a server? Maybe back in the day, just using RDP, and you get to that, and it's like already there.
Yeah.
Or a KVM console where somebody's just been logged.
Oh, lots.
Now I'm logged in as a domain admin.
Many times.
Or virtualized DC. So.
Yep, many times.
Implementation best practices for this control. Perform an access control audit. Right. You talked a little bit about how it may be department based. It may be project based, but identifying all users, systems, access points to determine who has access to it. And that's tough.
That is tough.
I mean, think of how many files. Think of how many like old file shares are just legacy Windows file shares that nobody wants to delete.
We did a consulting engagement for a company one day, and they told me they had 20 years of files live available. 20 years.
I can't even imagine like the folders, the links, like how many
Well, and it was terabytes of information. So, I mean, just the backup strategy for that alone, right?
Yeah, there was no backup strategy.
Probably not.
Implement the principle of least privilege. I think a lot of people, Sean has access to this and Chad does a rule like Sean, so the word is going to give them access to the same things. I've seen that a lot out in the field. That kind of just persists. But really kind of narrowing down like, hey, it's similar, but maybe it's a little bit different where, we know who has access to it, to what.
Right.
And then utilize an identity access management solution, centralize and automate this. And there's some, we'll talk about a little bit later. So,
okay.
And then just some products that we wanted to kind of call out to help with this, right? I would say the good is use the native operating system tools, right? You have Active Directory, you have like Windows file sharing, and this is all just kind of relative to the size of your organization, the maturity of your organization, and what you have in place. A better solution would really be like an IAM solution, like an Okta or Microsoft Entra ID or something like that.
Yep.
And really the best solution is ZTNA and just that whole zero trust network architecture.
Yeah. So ZTNA isn't a product, by the way. Right? It's not like there's no SKU out there for ZTNA.
You can't buy it and install
it. No. So, first of all, every company, every vendor you go to that claims ZTNA is going to have a different approach. So, for example, Fortinet is probably, because we're a big Fortinet vendor, so it's probably easiest for me to talk about that.
Let's talk about our solution.
So it's multiple subscriptions, right? So you'd be looking at things like network access control is definitely a portion of ZTNA. Fortinet has like a session tagging type thing so that we can migrate off of VPN and get rid of it because it needs to die, by the way, and move to more of a user-based access. So what a user needs access to, and we tag it inside the Fortinet system. And then they just get access with no VPN at all. Of course, multi-factor authentication. Segmentation is also a really, really big part of ZTNA.
We run into a lot of flat networks.
Yeah, still today.
And that's something we really didn't talk about in access control, but you're talking about now, right? That you can use that as an access control type mechanism.
No, absolutely. And specifically with the Fortinet track, there's a lot of like network access control features built into the FortiOS that you may not have to necessarily get a separate network access control platform. But their NAC, by the way, is very, very good. Very good. It was an acquisition. It's awesome. I can't remember who it was. No, I don't remember who it was. I want to say Brocade, but I don't think that's right. It's a good solution. But those are all like examples of components that make up a ZTNA architecture.
Right. So native operating system tools, IAM, if you're really mature going down that path, ZTNA is probably the wave of the future, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. So I just wanted to call out some policies and procedures to address this access control family.
Yeah, that's the fun part.
Yeah, you got to have an access control policy. Account management procedures, remote access policy, your password policy plays a role in that, data access and sharing policies, audit and monitoring policies. And these may all be named like slightly different. There's not any one set of like, you have to have this, but just kind of overarching, like those are the kind of things you'll want to have in place. And then what else did I want to cover here? Just some common challenges. Let's skip to the challenges, right? So managing user roles and permissions. Organizations really struggle to keep permissions up to date. It's tough it's really tough as the organization grows, right? And you have new users, you have new departments, you have data sprawl, you have all of these things that you're combating at once. But there's ways to do it, right? I mean, you can dump a list of Active Directory accounts. You can see what people are doing. I mean, there's a lot of different ways, but you got to do
Something.
You got to do something, right? So,
Yeah.
It's
Do you
a
want
hard
to talk
thing
about
do.
the tools?
Yeah, did I skip the tools? No, I got the tools. It was.
Well, I mean, as far as like managing permissions, like there's things like Netrix has.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We can talk about this.
Netrix, Manage Engine. I know Manage Engine has an AD audit tool. Netrix has a number of tools that you can use. And I've used one of those. I've used the Netrix stuff. I've never used Manage Engine, but I know people that use it.
Yeah, and that's reporting and alerting that
Yeah.
will alert you immediately if somebody's trying to access a share they're
Correct.
not or sensitive or have done something.
Yeah.
We've used Netrix a lot. I think that's a really good platform.
Yeah, I do too.
And it's really not too challenging to set up. I mean,
No.
once you get it set up initially, it's just kind of a set it and forget it
Yep.
and make sure you're getting the reports. But if you haven't seen a report in a couple weeks, then you got to go do something. So,
Yeah. Right.
another common challenge is balancing security and usability. You know, overly restricted policies, they hinder everybody. It's going to be a pain for IT. It's going to be a pain for users. It's going to be, well, I don't know why they didn't give you access to that. They should have. You know, it's just going to be kind of finger pointing back and forth. That's just really having kind of a really good onboarding and change management, program that, you're rolling through. And then addressing insider threats, ensuring controls are in place to detect and prevent malicious or accidental misuse of access. Hopefully people aren't sharing their passwords or doing
Right.
anything like that, but I don't know. An insider threat is like a whole different dynamic to access control, right?
Yeah, and password sharing, there's counter controls for things like that, right? So somebody does share their password, hopefully multi-factor gets in the way of that.
Correct. All right. So kind of wrap it up here.
Yeah.
Conduct an inventory of your current access controls, identify users with excessive or over-provisioned permissions.
Yeah, easy for you to say.
Yeah, right. And then if you don't have multi-factor, you got to get that implemented sooner rather than later. So get that going. And if you're going down through this with us, these are actionable things that you can take from the podcast. If you're struggling, feel free to reach out to us. We help customers go through, NIST compliance, CIS compliance, just compliance requirements all the time to try to help, improve their security posture. So you got anything else to add?
No, other than governance is hard. I mean, everything that you've talked about today, it's easy to implement the tools, but then what if the tools stop working? Or like you said, what if you all of a sudden start getting a report and then don't, right? How long is it going to take you to realize that you're no longer getting that report any longer? So it's very, very difficult to have all of this put in place and then to ensure that nothing gets missed.
Right.
That's the super hard part.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people have this misconception with compliance that, once they get their policies in place, once they have their procedures in place, it's going to just kind of go away and they're not going to have to be as hands-on. It's a hands-on gig,
Yeah.
and it really is. And it's constantly reviewing policy. It's
Right.
constantly reviewing the reports that you're getting to comply with that policy. You know what I mean? So it's really never ending and it's really kind of a hands-on gig. So
Yeah, it sure is.
all right.
All right.
So
Well, I think that wraps up access control.
Yep. Next time we'll be talking about user awareness and training and how to empower your workforce to be the first line of defense.
All right. Looking forward to it.
All right. We'll see you next time.
Yep. See you next time.